Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Wordfence Live. A key component of WordPress is a user role management system, which defines what a specific user can and cannot do on your WordPress website. Knowing these user roles and permissions are essential as your WordPress site continues to grow. Today on Wordfence Live, we're talking about user roles and access controls, no matter how you're using WordPress. So stay tuned. Today, we're taming the beast of user access, and we'll be right back to get started. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us on this edition of Wordfence Live. I hope everybody is having a good start to their Tuesday. Today is March 2nd, 2021. It's March already. Time flies when you're having fun, I suppose. Speaking of having fun, we are hiring here at Wordfence, and we're going to touch on that in just a moment. I'm streaming live from the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area here. Let us know where you are tuning in from. If this is your first time joining us, my name is Scott Miller. I'm a customer support engineer here at Wordfence. Today, I will be joined by our threat analysts, Ram Gall and Chloe Chamberlain. I'm going to be joined in the chat by our customer support lead, Tim Cantrell, and our customer support engineer, Adam Goodland. So they'll help you out with some questions, and we'll get some of your questions on the stream here as well. We have a lot to cover today, and it's going to be a fun one. Today's topic, user roles and access controls. So you have a site, and on your site, you have people logging in to buy things, maybe to read your blog posts, to take courses, maybe. Maybe you have a membership site. So understanding the user roles and the access control is important for the security of your site, and accessing the content on your site will typically be done via different roles, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So you got to know what the different permissions are for each of those roles, and know what each person who is visiting the site should be set up as, and that will ultimately help and is critical for your site's security. So today we're going to cover all of that, the capabilities, the permissions, and the different roles. So whether you're just getting started with a new site, maybe you have a new idea for a site, or you have a successful site that's continuing to grow, today's information can help you square away the roles and permissions for the users on your site and give you a better understanding of where you stand with your security. If you're excited about today's stream and the content, please hit the like button below the video here and let us know you're interested in this topic. You can also hit the subscribe button and the bell to be notified when we go live in the future. We've been going live every Tuesday at noon Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific. We're broadcasting to YouTube, so if you have anything specific to your site, maybe your site's been hacked, or you have a question specifically about something going on your site, it may be best to then just email us at feedback@wordfence.com and use the subject line Wordfence Live rather than posting anything sensitive in the chat. So let's get started with our content by bringing in our threat analysts, Ram Gall and Chloe Chamberlain.
Hi.
Hello, Ram. Hi, Chloe. How's it going?
It's going good. It's pretty cold here today. We got like Arctic blast coming at us, and so it's like negative 25 wind chill, so cold.
Yeah, it's. I was going to say it's cold here too, but it's not quite that bad. I'm suspecting, Ram, you're not getting anything like that over there, huh?
Yeah, I heard something about how it was supposed to drop to like freezing temperatures at some point this week, but it was like 70 degrees last night. Took a walk, and it was comfortable and pleasant. So this is the time of year that Arizona, uses to try and trick you into moving here.
Yeah, I went on a quick run yesterday. It felt, I think it was about 50, and then not too long after, we had a little bit of a whiteout and some snow. So it was quickly went towards the worst. But speaking of roles, Chloe, you've held a number of positions in the company. Can you give us an idea of where you started here and sort of the different positions you've held?
Yeah, of course. So about, I think almost 4 years now. I think I'm coming up on 4 years in a month. I started here as a sorry, the cat is like in my view. I started as a customer service associate, so I was handling like billing and pre-sales questions, and I started from like the very bottom, and then over the course of 4 years, I've slowly grown through the company. I then went to customer service engineer, where I handled actual like customer service cases and things like that, and then I moved on to handling site cleanings. So as I learned more and more about security, I was kind of able to grow into different security roles and grow through the company. And then now today I'm a threat analyst, so I'm looking for vulnerabilities out there in WordPress plugins, themes, and stuff. So I've had quite a journey from where I started to where I am now. Literally, when I started, I knew pretty much nothing about security and honestly barely anything about computers. I worked at Starbucks before this, so I've been given this amazing opportunity at this company to start from literally the bottom and make it to where I am today. So I love Wordfence.
And along the way, you've got quite a collection of certifications, right? How many do you have now?
Yeah, so I have 14 certifications now, all paid for by the company. So that's one of the great benefits about working here is that your certification costs are covered, the training materials you need to get those certifications covered, and you're allowed to do studying on work time. So one of the things that I like to try and do is spend about an hour a day on continuing education. Of course, that's not always possible because some days are just busier than others, but my goal is to spend about an hour a day on continuing education, and that's possible because I work here.
Yeah, so we're talking about some open positions here at Wordfence, and there's a lot of opportunity here in this company. So if you're interested or you know somebody who may be a good fit, you can head over to defiant.com, and the link that we'll be posting in the chat is defiant.com/defiant is hiring. You'll see an employment page on the Defiant site where you can check our open positions. We have a security operations engineer position, and what they would be doing is helping us secure our network and infrastructure, which serves over 4 million WordPress users. So you would be keeping our infrastructure secure, and you would be helping the millions of WordPress users worldwide do the same. We also have 2, I believe, PHP developer roles, as well as a website performance researcher. And Ram, I think this is for fast or slow, right? Research?
Correct. This is basically to gain some insights into website speeds, what impacts that, basically using fast or slow as a research tool to come up with key insights. So yeah, if you have a pretty deep understanding of, things like time to first byte or, JavaScript rendering time or, a cumulative layout shift, stuff like that, then you might be a good fit for this role. And
we're also, I was going to say,
go on.
we're offering a $500 Amazon gift card to anyone who refers a successful candidate, right?
Yep. And it is actually fun here. Like, Wordfence is putting me through school, and Chloe just got a master's degree. So, like, this place is absolutely rad.
And then, like, on top of that, you have literally the best coworkers you could ask for. Everyone is so knowledgeable. Everybody wants to help you learn and grow. One of the reasons I'm in this position I am now is because our lead developer, Matt Berry, helped teach me a lot of the stuff about vulnerabilities in WordPress and, like, how to find them and things. So you would literally be working with a team of literally just amazing people, and everybody wants to help you grow and learn. So
We are 100% remote.
Yes.
Yep. Very flexible schedules. We have a couple hours throughout the day for meetings, a few days a week that you got to try to shape the schedule around. But outside of that, you're able to set your schedule. We have, you mentioned certifications that we pay for and education, right, Chloe? But we also we travel. We go to we try to go to DEF CON every year when it's possible. We also get out to WordCamps. We cover phone and internet fees for employees and other wellness programs. And there's a lot, right, Chloe?
Oh, yeah. So, like, one of the things is we have a wellness program. So you get $100 a month or $1,200 a year, and you can use that for cooking classes. You can use it to get a snowboard and buy a snowboard pass. Anything that will help contribute to your well-being, which I think is a really amazing benefit. We just implemented that this year. So looking forward to using that this year.
Lots and lots of cool stuff. So go head over to defiant.com and check out the employment page there. And we're also going to be announcing some new positions coming up. So if you're not subscribed to the mailing list, that's a good opportunity to get on there and keep an eye out if security is what interests you. So we will be doing a swag question. Do you guys want to do that right now? Is now a good time, Ram, Chloe?
I think now's a great time. So we're going to talk about access control and roles. And our swag question of the day is, what is the difference between the editor role and the author role in WordPress? Or what is a key difference? Because there's a few correct answers. This is one of the fill in the blanks questions instead of the multiple choice this time. So pay attention.
We'll be getting we'll be giving swag to the first 5 correct answers. I see the form is posted in the chat, so go ahead and click on that. And if you know the answer, go ahead and submit it. If you don't, then take a stab at it, and we will let you know who won at the end of the show. Okay, Chloe, Ram, let's dive into it. Where do you want to start? And that question is for either of you. We're talking about roles and access control today. We got a lot to talk about. So if you're just starting a site or you're kind of going through and auditing your site right now, this is going to be good to follow along with. I guess we can start with an introduction, right, Ram?
Yeah. Well, I was going to let Chloe handle this, but
I can take over. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so before diving in, let's just discuss the topic of an object and a subject. So when you're referring to like security access control, you're going to want to know the difference between an object and a subject. So an object is basically something that you're going to be accessing. So it could be a computer, it could be a building, it could be data in a database. And so today we're talking about WordPress. So WordPress is the object we're going to be talking about the most today. And of course, there's smaller objects within your WordPress site and so on, but WordPress is the core object of what we're talking about today. And then you have the subject, which is whomever or whatever. It could be a person, it could be a software, or whatever that is accessing an object. So you have a subject and an object. The subject is something that is going to be accessing the object, which is information, data, WordPress site, or whatnot. And so access control is focusing on determining the appropriate access for users, software, or whatever to access these objects. So you want to control how it's being accessed. And I think that's the basics of subject and object. Does that sound about right, Ram?
That sounds right to me. I mean, there's always going to be there's other things that could be considered subjects, but we're talking about WordPress, so yeah, it's almost always going to be either a person or like a program or web application that also has access to WordPress. So,
awesome. And so the next step is there's different types of access controls, so different ways that you can control access. So the first one is going to be administrative controls, and so this is going to be things like policies and procedures. So if we're talking about WordPress, for example, it's going to be something like I have a policy that if I hire a contractor to write blog posts, they only get contributor access to my WordPress site. However, if I hire a full-time employee, they will get editor access or author access because I trust them a little bit more. There's more processes and things for them to go through for me to give them that access. So just policies stating, I'll do this or that, and procedures that you follow, and then you can use other controls to implement these administrative controls. And then the next control is going to be a physical access control. So that's going to be like perimeter fencing, lighting, locks on server rooms, those kind of things. And when we're talking about WordPress, you're likely not going to have to deal with that because that's something your hosting provider probably deals with their data centers and server rooms and all that stuff. So that's not something you worry about so much with WordPress unless you have your own, data warehouse and all that kind of stuff, but we won't go too far there. And then the final one is technical access control, and so that's going to be using things like firewall rules. What else? Implementing capabilities through software, all sorts of different
roles, right?
Yeah, roles. And so that's like doing things on your WordPress site, basically.
And that's what you'd use to implement the administrative access controls you were talking about, right?
Correct. Yeah. And so this is what we're primarily going to be focusing on today. And yeah, do you have anything to add to that, Rim? Just make sure I don't forget anything.
Oh, no, I think you totally covered it all. It's just, technical access controls are pretty much almost everything we're going to talk about, just because like administrative access control sort of decides what technical access controls are in place. And if they're not enforced by, something, then, you have to actually enforce the policy somehow or another. And technical access controls are what you're how you're going to see those enforced on a WordPress site.
So what are some of the common access control models?
So one of them is discretionary access control, and I want to let Ram take this one because I know he has a lot to talk about for this.
Okay, so discretionary access control is basically where the owners of objects can assign access to them. You'll see this on Google Drive. You'll see this on Microsoft Windows by default, basically. If you create a file, then you get to decide who else can access that file. If you create a directory, then you get to decide who else can access that directory. And by default, only you or an administrator can access it. But if you decide you want to let everyone access it, then, if you're the originator of that object, then you can make it available to the world. This is a fairly loose access control model. But, it works for certain organizations and certain setups reasonably well. So, don't discount it. If you were looking at sort of the opposite end of the spectrum, that's something called mandatory access control, which is where objects and subjects are assigned labels, and who can access the object is basically based on those labels. This is pretty common in government organizations. If you've heard of SE Linux, I suspect that some of you have used SE Linux and realize that it is not necessarily a great fit for a public-facing web server. There's a reason for that. That's because it was basically designed for the DoD to handle top secret and ultra-classified materials, and it is effectively overkill and uses a lot and requires a lot of additional configuration and overhead that is almost never actually necessary for most people's use cases. You might want to have SE Linux, set up and configured on one particular server hosting your, most precious data, but you may not necessarily need it on your, VPS running your WordPress site. If you can pull it off, go have at it. But if you played with it and you've wondered why you had to, add all these exceptions to get it to work, that's because it was not designed for your use case. But it is useful for the use case it's for, which is, again, handling super sensitive materials where you have to make sure that, only the people that are supposed to access a given thing can access it, and that is going to be a very different set of, permissions for every single object is going to have different permissions is really the thing. It gives you a lot of granularity in which objects can be accessed by which subjects. Do you want to do rule-based access control?
Yeah, so rule-based access control is it's kind of like role-based, which we'll get to next, but it's based on sets of rules and such. It's a little bit tricky to understand. So it's just based on rules. So let's see. Can you think of a rule off the top of your head, Ram?
So I kind of feel almost like rule-based access control is in between mandatory and role-based, and I feel like the sort of granularity allowed by particular capabilities in WordPress sort of counts. I'm sure that someone could make an argument that no, this is not a pure example of rule-based access control. But WordPress isn't strictly role-based because, it does have roles, but capabilities within those roles can be changed. So so a lot of access control in WordPress is, check if this particular user has a capability, and if this user has that capability, then let them do this thing. And that's a rule. WordPress used to be entirely role-based, and it would just be checks of are they an administrator? Have at. Are they an editor? Have at. But roles are a great way to assign people sets of capabilities. I do think that, WordPress uses sort of a combination of the two.
So you're
case
saying
you're-
rule-based would be like current user can edit post rather than current user can editor, right?
Yeah, I think that'd be a good way of saying it. It's checking if current user can edit posts rather than if current user is an editor, even though current user can is used for both.
If you're just joining in, we are talking about access control. We're in our introduction to access control, and we are just discussing role-based access controls, which is a common access control model here. So how about RBAC? This is role-based access control here, Ram.
Yeah, role-based access control where users have defined roles. That's sort of what WordPress uses at the, sort of on a macro scale. You have different roles that you can assign people to, editor, subscriber, author. This is actually very common in large organizations because it's a really easy way to handle the permissions of a bunch of people. And it's typically secure enough for most organizations' needs. So you basically assign users or subjects to different roles, which determine which objects they can access. And then if you need a little more granularity, you can combine this with rule-based access control.
We have a question from Alexander asking if access for users that can log in as contributors, are these a security threat in any way?
Oh boy. Yes.
Yes.
I want to say like half of the vulnerabilities that Chloe and I have found over the past few months have been for contributor level users. So
if like your users don't need to be creating posts on your site, then don't give them contributor access because there's vulnerabilities that require contributor access that allow people to like insert JavaScript and do all sorts of bad things. So if you don't need them to create posts on your site, even if they're moderated, just don't do contributor access.
And that takes us into why understanding access control is important, right?
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, the big thing is it really helps you determine what appropriate privileges are for each role and user type. Like, even if you're going to refine those permissions to some extent, it's still a really good starting point. I mean, it's a question of who needs what degree of access. You probably don't need everyone in your organization even to have administrative access to your site. You probably have someone whose entire job is to proofread other people's posts, so they need editor, they need to be in the editor role. Or you can go even more granular and keep them an author but just give them the edit others posts capability if you still don't quite trust them not to add JavaScript to site. So at that point, I mean, we hope you trust your authors, but at the same time, remember that every role can be socially engineered.
Good thing to keep in mind there. So we're talking about access control and why it is important. Anything to add there, Chloe, Ram, or do we want to move on here?
Well, I just want to add that it's important to understand what access control is and how you use or how you manage access control and things like that. Because there's policies that I don't know if that's the right term right now, like HIPAA and PCI DSS, RAM. Is that
There's compliance requirements, basically.
Yes,
depending on what kind of data your site handles. If it handles protected health information, then you might be subject to HIPAA. If you are taking payments, then you are subject to PCI DSS, which is not actually a law but an industry standard. I mean, if you are, an educational institution, then you're subject to FERPA. There's a lot of what industry are you in and how it can define what regulations you have to follow when protecting the data on your site or the data collected by your site. So Yeah.
Jody had mentioned that every role can be socially engineered, and I think we would rather see a subscriber on, my site. I'd rather see a subscriber get socially engineered than an administrator, or
Yeah.
the user with that capability at least. So assigning out the right capabilities down the line to the people that are accessing your site is important in that regard.
Yeah. What we mean by that is basically that, you can send a phishing email to a subscriber and you can send that same phishing email to an administrator. And if an administrator falls for it, they're going to do a lot more damage. And we certainly hope that, people who have the responsibility of administering a website seek to educate themselves in security. And that's part of why we do Wordfence Live. But not everyone is going to stay educated, and not everyone is going to make sure that, people that you don't keep up with things are, assigned roles appropriate to how much they care about the security of the site. So,
And to add to that, if you have 50 administrators on your site instead of one administrator and 49 subscribers, you now have 50. The probability of an attacker getting access to one of those administrated accounts is a lot higher than if you had one administrator account and 49 subscriber accounts. So your attack surface is much larger for like high value accounts, if that makes sense.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, we always, one of the things we always recommend the most is having 2FA enabled and a very complex and unique password for each site. So if you have 50 or, for Chloe's example, a bunch of administrators on the site, that is a lot more, that's a lot higher probability or a chance that somebody could end up being,
And I mean,
losing their role there.
And I mean, ask yourself, who do you trust and what do you trust them to do? And I mean, we talk about insider threat and cybersecurity a lot, and that makes a lot of people think of, malicious insiders, stealing data from the company. But most of the time, insider threat is just someone who's, might not be aware that, phishing is a thing that could happen to them. And, they'll just click a link and then they are the insider threat by accident because they weren't being careful enough. So it's not a question of who you trust not to be malicious. It's a question of who you trust to be cautious with the permissions you've granted them.
And there's even the chance that an accident might happen. So like if you give someone administrator access and all they need to do is like create posts and stuff, there's a chance that they might delete a plugin or two by accident somehow. I don't know how, but off the top of my head. But like there's the chance that they could do something that they're not authorized to do on accident. It's not malicious intent, but if they have those capabilities, they can do that. So it's important to just make sure they have the least amount of privileges they need, and we'll talk about that again a little bit too.
Yes, one of your favorite topics, principle of least privilege. But yes, we will actually get to that. So let's see. I think we might have. Then there's the case of, even subscriber level permissions. Like, if you don't have an e-commerce site, if you're not soliciting comments on your blog, or if you don't necessarily have a mailing list or something, you might not want to let people sign up as subscribers on your site, because every new set of users increases your attack surface. So there are total use cases. Yeah, if you're running an e-commerce site, you have to have customers, and you probably have to have customers that can, sign up. But if your site doesn't need that, then you may not even want to let people register as subscribers, because there's a ton of vulnerabilities we found over the last year that have required at least subscriber level privileges. But, a lot of websites have open registrations, so that's they would still be vulnerable.
We were talking about WordPress users, permissions, and capabilities here. Do we want to start going into user roles and capabilities? Maybe talk about some of the common WordPress user roles that we see?
I think that is a very good idea. I think we're right on track for that. Chloe, I'm going to toss the ball back to you.
All right, awesome. So roles and capabilities are essentially what allow us to implement some of those technical access controls. And so the first thing I want to talk about is a capability, which is going to be essentially a permission that is used to grant a user the ability to do something. So you're going to have like edit posts, which allows you to edit posts. That's a capability. Upload files is another capability, so that allows you to upload files. Unfiltered HTML is another one, so that allows you to use unfiltered HTML in posts and things. There's all sorts of different capabilities, upload plugins, and so those are really granular. And then you have a role, which is essentially a group of capabilities. So this could be edit posts, upload files, all those into one role, which is going to be assigned a label. And basically, those are the ones that WordPress comes with by default. So administrator, editor, author, subscriber, and contributor. So administrator is going to be like the holy grail account for the most part. This allows you to do everything on your WordPress site, from uploading files to installing plugins to editing plugins and themes, everything that you need to do to manage your WordPress site. And then you have editors, so that is going to be the next one down from administrator. So it has not almost everything. So it has almost everything you need to manage posts and edit pages and posts and moderate comments and do that kind of thing. So it basically is like an editor in the real world. You're not going to have the ability. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, you're not going to have the ability to like update plugins or delete them or anything, or like update WordPress, but like unfiltered HTML, even like if you really want to add JavaScript to a site as an editor, you can.
Yeah.
Which makes them a target for social engineering.
Yeah. So actually, just off that, administrator and editor are the only two user roles that actually get unfiltered HTML, which is basically what you can use to put like script tags and things into post. And so that's just something to note. I don't know if it's really relevant, but those are the only two roles that get it, just so everyone knows. And then the next role you have is author. And so that's like writing, editing, and publishing posts. You can't moderate comments or approve comments, but you can view pending comments, I believe. Right, Ram?
Yeah, because editing comments requires the edit other people's posts or edit others' posts capability, which is an editor or administrator level capability. So authors are basically the lowest level that can publish their own posts is really the big thing. Publish or delete their own posts. These are people that you trust to actually put content on your site, even if you don't necessarily trust them to put, programmatic content on your site, like JavaScript.
Yeah.
I think we may have had that was related to our swag question there a moment ago, right, Chloe? The potentially one of the differences with the editors and authors there.
Yes.
And we'll be getting back to those swag winners here in just a moment.
Yes, depending on how fast that the answers get filled out, we can always add some hints later, but we'll see if we need that.
And then we have the contributor account, which is the next one down. And so this one, you can create posts, but you can't publish them. You can't edit other people's posts or publish other people's posts or things like that. You can't moderate comments or anything like that. So this is like if you have a blog that you want to have like community writers, this would be the role to give them so that you can check out the post before they publish it. And that's when you trust them, but you don't trust them quite enough to handle publishing their own content. And then the next one down, you have a subscriber, and this is the most basic account you can give someone. It's just going to give you access to the admin dashboard and the ability to edit your profile. I don't know if there's any other small capabilities in there. Do you know, Ram? I think that's about it.
There's read posts, but again, you can still password protect posts, or you can refine access to posts in a number of other ways. Don't forget super admins. If you are using WordPress on a multi-site installation, even administrators don't have access to everything on all the sites. They just have access to the whatever site they're assigned to. You'd actually have to be a super administrator to have multi-site access. And realistically, on a multi-site, usually any like plugins or theme settings are going to be controlled by the super admin rather than the administrator. There's also something to keep in mind, and that is that a lot of third-party plugins add custom roles and custom capabilities for those roles, and sometimes those custom roles and custom give more capabilities than are necessarily safe for what they sound like. So, be aware of we're actually going to go into this a little bit later and show you how to manage roles and capabilities more granularly. But for the time being, just be aware that, these are the default roles and capabilities, but there it is possible for plugins to add new roles, like WooCommerce adds a customer role and a shop manager role, which is kind of in between author and editor, but it doesn't have unfiltered HTML, but it does have the ability to like create and publish products and stuff like that. Whereas customer is kind of like subscriber, but I think it has a few other capabilities like viewing orders or viewing your own orders. So yeah, just be aware that these are the defaults, but WordPress can be extended to have whatever roles and capabilities, you know, the plugin author can think of. Don't we have like a Kinsta chart of default roles and capabilities?
I was going to say there's also a good page on the WordPress.org site for roles and capabilities as well. We will try to post that into the chat for you to take a look. We just talked about, Ram, you brought up the super admin for a multi-site, and I don't want to get too far off track, but if you're running a multi-site, you can really benefit with Wordfence with the premium and the site cleaning and audit. Chloe mentioned earlier at the top of the show that she used to clean sites, and if you have a multi-site, you pretty much have all of your sites there cleaned with just one cleaning, right, Chloe?
Yes.
And you pay the one-time cleaning or audit fee, and if you have 10 sites set up on that multi-site, you know, they're sharing the database there and they get cleaned. And the same with the premium license, you know, no matter how many sites you have under that multi-site, your one premium license is protecting you there. If you're just joining in, we're talking about users and permissions and roles and capabilities. And we just started to go through some of the additional roles that you can see with different plugins such as WooCommerce and BuddyPress and some different plugins like that. And you can start to really rack up the amount of different roles and stuff you're seeing on your site, so it can get a little difficult to manage. So you want to keep an eye on what capabilities those roles have and what they have access to.
Yeah, and then you know, there's things like you mentioned backup plugins like BackWPup, where it gives you different capabilities related to backing up. Something to keep in mind is that, like, you know, if you can restore a backup, then you can obtain ownership of a site by restoring like a web shell or like malicious content in the database, or yourself as an administrator into the database. So like things that might not necessarily be obvious as intrusion vectors can still be intrusion vectors, even if they don't necessarily, even if they seem innocuous. Of like, okay, yeah, I trust this guy to restore backups. Well, which backups do you trust them to restore? Can they supply their own and get in that way? So, yeah.
Lots of things to take into consideration. The more users you have on the site, and you know, we talked about registration and limiting it if possible on your site, but that's not always possible, unfortunately. We have our swag winners ready to go here, and we have a graphic for that, I believe. So we have Jody, Ryan, Martin, Merdad, I believe. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. David, and we have an honorable mention of Joel. Not sure I saw what the honorable mention was, but good job there for, I suspect, submitting a correct answer there. So congratulations to our 6 winners there. Oh, the honorable mention made Tim laugh, I see, and that is our customer support lead, Tim. I would be curious to see that answer. So good job to all of you. We will contact you and get the swag sent out to you. And as always, if you won swag and you have pictures, feel free to send those in. We love posting them here on the stream. So we just got done going over some of the different custom roles and plugins. Do we want to talk about some best practices?
Yes, let's talk about the principle of least privilege.
Chloe likes to talk about this, but I haven't heard it come up on the show for a while. So this can be a refresher for some of you, and this is one of Chloe's favorites.
Yeah. So just want to apologize real quick. The generator's outside running, so if you can hear it, I apologize. But so the principle of least privilege is a very important concept when we're talking about security. So it's basically saying that you need to provide users with the least amount of privileges they need to do in order to do whatever they need to do. So for example, if you have someone that needs to sign up for a newsletter on your site, do they need to have subscriber access in order to do that? If not, then you shouldn't give them that privilege. If you have someone that needs to edit posts, so giving them that edit post capability and nothing else is what you should do in order to maintain the principle of least privilege. Sorry, I'm like getting distracted. Does that sound about right, Ram?
Yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, one thing to be a little bit careful of is that there's a lot of capabilities that, that aren't obvious that you might not think you need, but you do need in order to perform a duty. So it's best to sort of prune capabilities back one by one, or add them one by one, rather than, just assigning a single capability to a person at a time. Like if someone can't view the admin dashboard, then they're not going to be able to edit a post. If they can't edit other people's posts, then they can't manage or approve or moderate comments. But, at the same time, you could say, hey, I really trust my editor, but I don't want them to have unfiltered HTML capabilities, but I want them to have everything else an editor can do. And that would probably work well for almost everyone, unless you need to add iframes to your posts. In which case, you definitely need unfiltered HTML if you're embedding third-party content that isn't managed by WP's OE embed. So, yeah.
So if they need it, you give it to them. If they don't need it, don't give it to them.
And occasionally check through your users and make sure that, oh, hey, this guy, he kind of stepped away from his duties. We sort of moved him to a different role. Maybe he doesn't need admin anymore. Maybe he's fine with just, editor or, author capabilities because he still writes articles but doesn't necessarily, maintain the site anymore. You were going to talk about dual account control, which is that kind of brings us to our next thing. It's even if you are an administrator, even if you trust yourself, if you're not actually logging into your site to do actual administrative stuff, update plugins, update WordPress, edit the theme, that kind of thing, if you're just writing content, log yourself in as an editor or even an author. Create a separate account for your own use that has a lower level of privileges, because if someone sends you a cross-site request forgery, if your site has a cross-site request forgery vulnerability and someone sends you a malicious link and you click on it and you're logged in as an administrator, they could potentially use that to take over your site. If you're only logged in as an author, they won't have nearly as much of an easy time.
Yeah, and so if they leave it in a comment and you're moderating comments and you click on the link, if you're logged in as a author or editor, and the cross-site request vulnerability relies on that user being an administrator, then you're not going to, the exploit won't be successful. So that's a really important thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, go on, Scott.
I was going to say, I feel like I've seen that happen before, and it's because it's happened to Ram and I both here on Wordfence Live,
Yes.
thanks to Chloe. So,
yes, Chloe has socially engineered both of us. So,
yeah, if you're curious to see how exactly that plays out, if you've never seen that or curious about seeing it, you can scroll back through our YouTube channel, and Chloe has demonstrated that with Ram and myself a few times. We're talking about dual account control here. And some best practices to follow when it comes to assigning roles and manage access. What else do we want to cover here?
Separation of duties. So this is kind of less about access control and more, it is to some extent, it dovetails nicely with principle of least privilege, but you kind of want to make sure that, if you have a sufficiently large organization, one person isn't handling all of the high-level access stuff. Just because basically, well, one thing, if that person turns out to be untrustworthy, then that's a really bad situation. But another thing is it's just generally a better idea to, have one person handle just the updates of plugins and themes and such, and another person handling the site design if you have a large enough organization. You don't necessarily want a single account that, either person can log into to do both.
And that's separation of duties there. So not so much about the access control.
And like a lot of WordPress sites, you know, they're not going to be belonging to organizations that are large enough that this really becomes an issue. But, you know, like if your org is large enough and people have strictly defined duties, then make sure that, you know, they kind of stick to those.
Now, as far as we just went over dual account control there, and that would require creating additional accounts. And that seems like that might be something that's best for maybe potentially a smaller site where you don't have a bunch of accounts. It seems like creating more accounts on top of a registration site or an e-commerce site.
It shouldn't be a problem as long as you don't use the same password for both accounts, and especially if you have two-factor authentication turned on for both accounts, then you should be good. It's mostly a case of where, yes, having more accounts can increase your attack surface if you're reusing credentials.
And that's something we always talk about here, separate credentials for each site that you sign up for. And ideally, it also comes back also to using a password manager, which makes it very simple to change out your passwords and keep track of them. So separation of duties. Next on the list here, need to know.
Yeah, so you should control access based on a need to know. So basically, does this user need to have access to see all the posts? If not, then they shouldn't have access to it. It's kind of like principle of least privilege, but it's more based on access control rather than privileges themselves. So you just need to see, do they need to know this information? Do they need access to my WordPress site and things like that? And if they don't, then you don't give them access. And if they do, then you do give them access. And then you give them access based on the principle of least privilege and give them the least amount of privileges they need in order to access it.
Yes, that, and you want to avoid what we call privilege creep, which is, again, let's say that, your normal admin steps out for, a week and you have someone else taking over that role for the week. So you might grant them additional privileges during that week. Make sure you revoke those privileges once your normal admin is back. And this is not necessarily because you don't trust the person who was taking over those duties. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't have assigned them to that. But, again, it's, more attack surface. The more people you have that have access, the larger your attack surface is.
Now, before we move on to our next section here, I want to say again, congrats to our swag winners. And I don't believe that we actually said what the differences were between the editor and author roles there. We've brought it up in our content, but Chloe, do you want to give us maybe one of the correct answers there, what one of the differences may be?
Yeah, so one thing that the editor role has that the author role does not have is the unfiltered HTML capability. Another thing is that they have access to moderate comments, so like approving them and editing them, right, Ram?
Edit others' posts is really the capability, is the other capability that editors have that authors don't. It's, if they can basically look at and alter any other user's posts, instead of just being able to edit and publish their own.
Or as one person put it, the author creates the content and the editor messes it up. That sounds like that may be an answer from an author, huh?
I mean, Chloe and I edit each other's posts before they go out a lot. So this is, I hope it's not actually true. But
I guess it depends on who your editor is, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
So we've covered a lot here. We still have a little bit to go through. We got about 10 minutes. Ram, Chloe, is there anything specifically that you want to cover here?
I think you maybe had a demo.
Yeah, let me get that pulled up real quick. I was just going to show you all what a user role editor would look like. So let me share my screen. Oh, how am I going to do this? 1 second. The monitor's going to turn on here. So one reason we want to show you this is that managing capabilities and such, if you want to be more granular, you can use user role plugins. And so that's going to give you the ability to assign specific capabilities to perhaps custom roles or just other roles. So you could add more capabilities to the subscriber account or whatnot. So it's pretty important to show you this. So let me share my screen. I got it all hooked up now. All right, so here is my WordPress site. So there's several different plugins that you can use for this. There's User Role Editor, Members. I believe Ultimate Member has the ability to create custom roles and such. There's literally so many options out there, so you should research those and figure out what would be the best for your use case. It's going to be different for everyone, but to go into this, go ahead and go to Users, and I'll show you the User Role Editor real quick. So this one, you can see, you can change it to different roles. So author, contributor, editor, and subscriber. It's not allowing you to edit the administrative role. But what you could do is you can, if you're curious about all the different capabilities there are, we did give you some resources, but then again, you can see them here as well and figure those out. But here's all of them in one little area that you can see. So there's tons of different ones, and then it's find down, so you can go to core, general, so edit dashboard, export, import, install language, upload files, unfiltered HTML, unfiltered upload. You can add these to any user.
Don't add them to subscriber users, please. I mean, do. Yes, that will, make it much easier to socially engineer you.
And then you have posts. So that's, again, delete others' posts, edit posts, those kinds of things. Pages, again, plugins, users. So like creating users, deleting users, custom post types, nothing there. Custom capabilities. You can create your own capabilities and add them to your site. And then plugins will create some custom capabilities as well and use those for control over certain things. So that's what the user role editor plugin looks like. And then the other one is members. That I have pulled up. Again, you have the roles. You can add a new role. And then you can go through and look at all these different things. So post again. And so these are all going to be the same capabilities. They're going to be the same across the board.
That cloning an existing role thing, by the way, that I think both of those plugins give you the option to do, that is a really good starting point. Like, it's much, much easier to, if you have an idea in mind of what you want your custom role to do, it's much better to take an existing role that is closest to the one you want to create and then clone it and then change that than it is to create a new role from scratch.
Yeah, so like you could clone the subscriber role. You could change it to subscriber refined. And let's say you just want to give them the ability to, I don't know.
Upload images?
Yeah, let's say that one. Where would that fall under? Media. Upload files. We'll go ahead and grant that. And then now your subscriber can upload files.
Which could never, ever go wrong.
No, never. We actually have a post coming out this week that will have some information about this. But so subscribe to our mailing letter if you want to find out more about this upload files thing that we're talking about.
You took the words right out of my mouth there, Chloe.
Yeah. And so you can go ahead and add this role. And so that would be a refined subscriber where you can upload files and such. So these are really cool if you want to get more granular with your capabilities and implement the principle of least privilege, take away privileges from like an editor role or things like that. And then another thing is you should make sure that you're testing these roles as you're doing it. So there's actually a plugin called user switching. And so what you can do is you can actually switch in between roles. So let's go ahead and grant this to let's grant that subscriber refine to this user, update user, go back to users, and I'm going to go ahead and use the switch to thing. So you just find the user that you want to switch to, and then now I can go here and I can see that new user. I can go to my profile. This is a subscriber default. And then go to media, and now I can upload media. So you want to make sure that you're testing those as you're adding the capabilities and taking them away to make sure that it's still providing you the use you need. And for this, you can actually create like just a fake user profile, and you can test your roles using that, make sure it still has a strong password and such, and then just delete that user when you're done testing it out. So I think that's all I had to show for, kind of managing that. Is there anything else we should cover?
I think that was pretty cool, honestly. Like that, yeah. This is actually a very useful set of knowledge and skills to learn if you're in charge of one or more sites, and you want to make sure that they're actually secure. This is probably one of the most important skill sets you can have. I remember one of our comments near the beginning of the live stream is someone actually apparently were mentioning that they found a couple access control bugs, and like seriously, like so many of the vulnerabilities we find are directly or indirectly due to access control problems, that they would not be vulnerable if access control had been handled a little bit more carefully. This is actually at the core of so much of what actually makes WordPress secure or not secure.
Should we jump to securing your plugins with the appropriate capability checks real quick, just to?
Yeah, why not?
And then I think we can wrap up after that.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, so we've talked about access control and everything, and it's not just the responsibility of the site owner, it's the responsibility of plugin developers as well, theme developers and everything. You need to make sure that you are using the appropriate capability checks for certain functions. So if you have a function that will, let's say, upload backup files, you might not want to get, say, if current user can upload files, because that means a author, editor, and administrator can do that. So that would be kind of a bad one to use, but what you could do is something like, if current user can upload files and manage options, then that might be a good route to go, because it would be an administrator because they manage options, and then upload files because you're uploading a file, so you want to make that check. And so you want to make sure as a developer that you're using the appropriate capability checks on functions, and yeah.
Yeah, and like, you know, there's a ton of page builders that we have run into in the past year, some fairly popular ones where, you know, they might not have been checking whether or not a user has the edit posts or edit others posts capability before letting them into the custom editor, or, you know, allowing all roles by default and needing to have those roles turned off. I mean, there's a number of ways this could go wrong. Custom HTML, not a lot of people are really going to need the unfiltered HTML capability. And WordPress has a really, really cool and really useful HTML filtering function called WP cases. That's just super cool because it'll strip out harmful or dangerous tags like script and iframe, and even like attribute-based cross-site scripting, while letting you, you know, insert rich formatting, insert links, insert images, that kind of thing. And so you won't need unfiltered HTML just to do normal editing, even if you're adding, you know, actual HTML effects. It's just that prevents unsafe HTML.
Well, we covered a lot today on user roles and capabilities and access control. We appreciate everybody who stopped by. First off, we want to say thanks to our premium subscribers who, without you, this wouldn't be possible for us to do these streams every week and build services such as Fast or Slow and Wordfence Central, and keep adding features to those. If you're not using those two services, head over and check those out. We talked about Wordfence Central a good bit on one of our recent streams, so if you're just getting set up with your sites and want to get those added to Wordfence Central so you can monitor them all from one place, check out that stream. That was just a few weeks ago. Fast or Slow, we've talked about it quite a bit recently, and we had a stream maybe a month or two ago that talked about all of the metrics on Fast or Slow that you see whenever you enter your website URL in there, and it really helps you understand how fast your slow is, or if it's having, how fast your site is, or if it's having trouble in certain areas. And
in my case, my site is slow, or my slow is site, I should say.
And that's actually something we may be covering next week, right? We're going to bring a slow site back from the dead and cover.
I'm going to wreck my site even more.
Yeah, you might have to. I don't think your site is quite that bad, so it's either going to have to be wrecked, or we're going to have to grab another site. How is Sally's cat blog doing, Chloe? Is it probably too good for our demonstration, I would say?
Well, it's kind of abandoned, so probably bad.
Maybe I could use that Sally's cat blog. Like, you know, we could take some backups. We could kind of break some code.
Yeah.
Now, your talk, you did a talk that we're sort of basing our Wordfence Live off of next week, potentially, and I believe that can be found on the WordPress TV site, right, Ram?
Yeah, that was my first WordCamp talk, so please be gentle, but it was about the spooky topic of WordPress necromancy.
Yes, and we're probably going to be diving into that next week. So if you're curious about that, maybe you have a site that you have not been keeping an eye on, or you inherited a site that's in really bad shape. That's something we covered last week. Maybe if it's really bad, you're going to want to follow along next week as we bring this site back to life. So thanks again to our premium subscribers who make this possible. If you're not a premium subscriber, $99 for a license. That'll also cover your staging site, your test site as well, and you're getting access to our real-time firewall rules, which Chloe and Ram are getting out there very quickly whenever they find issues. That's another reason to be subscribed to the mailing list, as Chloe mentioned, because you will be the first to know issues. Chloe is working on a blog post that she teased, so go ahead and get subscribed if you want to be the first to hear about that.
I've got one too that'll hopefully be coming out this week.
So this is a good week to be subscribed, and we also have a separate mailing list for our podcast. And if you're not checking out the podcast already, head over to wordfence.com, go down to the bottom there, and you will see the podcast link close by the mailing list link. And Ram, what did you discuss on last week's podcast? I know I saw some. There was a story of Android and some good WordPress stories in there.
Yeah, we've WordPress 5.7 is getting a new feature where admins can send you passwords themselves.
Yes.
So we kind of went over the implications of that. We've also discussed a botnet that was using the blockchain and Bitcoin wallet transactions to deliver instructions to its own crypto mining malware. And we talked about a VMware vulnerability that was pretty critical. And yeah, so, I mean,
The
listen to it if you
WordPress
like
update
podcasts.
there is coming out, I believe, is it this week or the 8th, I believe, potentially, that we'll have that feature, if I remember correctly from the podcast.
All goes on in time. Oh, I see. We have. We might have to hire her. I think
Yes,
she might be a
yes.
shoe-in.
Experience.
Oh
Yes. Oh my goodness. That's so
Well,
cute.
Sally's cat blog is doomed. That's all I have to say.
That's the Billie Piper resume, huh? Yes, we haven't seen a Billie Piper picture for a little while, but if you've been tuning in for a while now, you've seen.
We
some
want to hire
pictures.
her based on her skills, okay?
Yes, yes.
Yes,
Even though she is the goodest girl, Billie Piper is.
absolutely. Okay, everybody, thank you for joining us this week on Wordfence Live. We will be back next week. Ram and I are going to bring a site back from the dead, and you may hear Ram's horror movie voice for that show.
Spooky.
Go ahead and hit the like button below the video here if you're excited for the content. You can subscribe and hit the bell. You'll be notified before we go live next week. We hope that you have a good rest of the week. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time here on Wordfence Live. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.